Hi there, this is Marielle Concepcion, your host of the My DPC Story podcast. Have you or someone you care about ever been burned by the U.S. healthcare system? If so, you are listening to the right video, because if you are listening, chances are the answer is yes. But the U.S. spends so much on healthcare. Why are so many Americans affected personally and especially financially by the healthcare system? Shouldn't that mean we have better healthcare access and treatment options? Shouldn't it be easy for us to be able to see our doctor when we need to instead of turning to the ER or urgent care? Historically, it's been seemingly impossible to answer these questions. But now that is changing through the direct primary care movement. This video that you have tuned into will bring you into the world of direct primary care and show you how physicians all over the country are changing the way they practice so patients from all backgrounds get the high quality care they need and deserve, which makes for both happy patients and physicians. Learn even more by subscribing to the My DPC Story YouTube channel. Find us on all major podcast platforms. Find us on socials at My DPC Story and at mydpcstory.com. There you can find resources including how to find a DPC doctor near you, conferences about DPC, DPC startup guides and advice, a store with DPC swag, and even a mapper showing where podcast guests are practicing. Thanks for tuning in to hear about this powerful movement. Now, on to the episode. Direct primary care is an innovative, alternative path to insurance-driven healthcare. Typically, a patient pays their doctor a low monthly membership and, in return, builds a lasting relationship with their doctor and has their doctor available at their fingertips. Welcome to the My DPC Story podcast, where each week you will hear the ever-so-relatable stories shared by physicians who have chosen to practice medicine in their individual communities through the direct primary care model. I'm your host, Marielle Concepcion, family physician, DPC owner, and former fee-for-service doctor. I hope you enjoy today's episode and come away feeling inspired about the future of patient care, direct primary care.
I would just say that this has been so far the most fulfilling experience I've had in my career that has combined the passion I have for medicine and my patients with the values I have. And I don't feel conflicted. I feel like I'm in my place. I found my spot. And that's a really powerful feeling. And I hope other people will take the risk to see if they can't find that same spot. Because most people in their life don't ever get a chance to do that. I am Dr. Lara Vicente-Kinney of Leeton Medical, and this is my DPC story.
Dr. Lara Vicente-Kinney is a board-certified internal medicine physician with additional specialty training and board certifications in hematology, oncology, hospice, and palliative care. Born and raised on the West Coast, she first moved to the Midwest in 1997 to attend medical school. After graduating from the University of Missouri Kansas City School of Medicine, she entered into active duty in the United States Army and completed her internal medicine training at Fort Sam Houston. During her 7 years of Army service, she deployed several times in support of the Military Police Corps. She returned to the University of Kansas City to complete additional years of specialized medical training in hematology-oncology and then met and married her husband. In 2014, they moved back to his hometown of Clinton, Missouri to raise a family. Patients have described her as smart, down-to-earth, honest, and practical. She prides herself in taking a true personal interest in caring for each and every patient. Apart from medicine, her other interests include delicious food, family, fellowship, and everything to do with horses. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Kinney.
Hi, I'm happy to be here.
You are from the West Coast originally, and then you ended up in the Midwest going to medical school. So I definitely could relate to that journey, as my journey out to the Midwest was for the same reason, to go to Creighton. So can you tell us how that all happened, that you went from the West Coast to the Midwest?
Sure. Did your family think you were crazy too?
So actually, my parents were like, there's nowhere else you can go. You must go to Creighton because Laura Freeberg, she was one of the administrative assistants, when they went out to Omaha and they checked out Creighton to see, what is this Creighton a business about? Why are we paying so much for her to go to school here? They were completely lost in the hallway, and Laura Freeberg walked up to them and she was like, "You look lost. Can I help you?" And so when they got a taste of that Midwestern,
Midwest in a
oh yeah,
nutshell.
yeah. And so they were like, "Yep, you're going to Creighton. Period. Deal
done.
Done.
Take care of you. They're going to take care of my baby. You're going to Creighton."
Yep.
Yeah. I was born and raised in California, and then we moved to Oregon. And I knew from a very early age I wanted to be a doctor. I don't really remember ever wanting to be anything else, honestly. And so when I was in high school, like many of us, I was overachiever, straight A's, all of that stuff. And I applied to a number of programs that had guarantees. And I pretty much had my heart going to Rice with a guarantee to Baylor, because similarly, when we went to visit, it was like an awesome experience. And I really liked Texas, and I really thought that's what I was going to do. And then my father was on a flight to Alaska for one of his hunting, fishing trips, I don't know what. And in the back seat pocket of the airplane that he was sitting on, he found the brochure for the University of Missouri, Kansas City 6-year program. And he brought it home from that trip and he said, I think you should apply to this. It's only 6 years. It's direct. You don't have to worry about getting into medical school. You don't have to worry about all the strings attached and everything. And gosh, if I remember, it was like days before the deadline. I scratched it out. I didn't even type it. All their applications had great attention to detail and proofreading and typing. My mom typed them up and all of these things. That one, I just got down something on paper and got it in before it was due. And the brochure said something about only accepting 10 out of state a year. I don't know, something small. And I thought, whatever. And then a couple months later, I got a packet saying that they wanted to interview me. And I flew out with my mom to Kansas City, having never been farther east than probably New Mexico, maybe. Both sides of my family are from California. Everybody I know lives in California. So my mom and I fly into Kansas City. Similar experience. Everybody's super nice. They pick us up from the airport. Everybody's just salt of the earth. And we got to the interviews, and everybody had their parents with them because we were all 17, 18-year-old kids. And my mom's a very unassuming, my whole family, none of us we're all pretty like humble working class. And everybody else was from out of state as well. And they all had both parents with them, and they were super assertive and like, my kid this, my kid that. My mom didn't say a word. I was just kind of like, all right, whatever. I mean, they had like full business suits on. I think I was in a turtleneck and a pair of black jeans, if I remember correctly. A totally different league. And I just went through the thing, did my interview. I told my mom I thought that it was a good interview, came home, and I got offered the spot, and none of them did. So I guess it was meant to be. But that's how I ended up in the Midwest. I came out for medical school. There's no other reason for me to come out here. And then now I live here. But that's another story.
It's amazing how things happen for a reason. And the idea of us Californians moving anywhere else, I still think about, wow, like I never would have expected to leave California for any reason. And then the heart of the Midwest is truly like, if I could choose a second place where I didn't care if I had blood family or not, I would move to Superior, Nebraska or Blair, Nebraska. I promised.
I still want to go back to Texas, but my husband's absolutely not. And COVID's pretty much sealed the deal on that one.
For sure. I
love Texas.
Does the medical school still offer a 6-year program?
Yeah, they've restructured the curriculum a little bit, I think. So when I was in the program, they accepted about 100 a year, that plus minus a dozen or so. Their charter, like the way they were able to get funding for an additional medical school in the state, was they really had to focus on in-state students, and they're supposed to deliver like a certain amount of primary care to rural Missouri. So that was why they limited the out-of-state students rather severely. And we did our first year, our second year, and then when we were going into our third year, they offered the spots for the attrition. We'd lost like a dozen people or so, and they filled some of those spots with traditional students. But usually it was like 2, 3. It really wasn't enough to change the character of the experience. I went back there for fellowship, and it had changed quite a bit. It's much more of a mix of some 6-year and more traditional students. They've pivoted some for whatever reason, but
I'm glad you mentioned that though, because especially if there's somebody who knows a person that is looking to apply to medical school, to mention that as an option is really a good thing, because had I ever heard of Creighton University? Heck no, before my friend told me, hey, they have a post-bac program. So that's how I ended up at Creighton. Now, you are an internal medicine doctor by training and then did fellowship in hematology oncology. So I want to ask, when you were in training and when you were in residency, when you did your fellowship, what was that life like for you?
So part of the thing that was unique about the 6-year program, I think there's a few other in the country, but they all do their own thing. At the time that I was at UMKC, the emphasis was on heavy clinicals. So we started clinicals our first year. So we had clinicals for 6 years and very heavy in internal medicine. So every single year I had 2 months of inpatient internal medicine. And then we had a continuity clinic with a 1 day a week clinic with the same doctor for that whole time. We were set up in like small teams. So when I graduated, I was on an Army scholarship actually. And I went straight into active duty in the Army. I moved to San Antonio, Texas. And that's actually where I did my internal medicine residency. I was fortunate that I had excellent internal medicine clinical experience as a student. I would say more than many of my peers. I was essentially already functioning as an intern by the last 2 years of medical school, because that's just the way the program was set up, like the hierarchy. And so when I went into internship, I felt quite comfortable. And then in addition, it's the biggest hospital in the Army with the highest acuity level. So I got really stellar training. I think really second to none. I feel like I got an amazing internal medicine background, especially for inpatient. Tons of procedures, lots of high acuity, lots of critical care, lots of autonomy. That was before some of the work hour restrictions. So we were like the only people in the hospital a fair amount of time, which is priceless, honestly, when you're training. And then on top of that, the war was going on by then in Afghanistan and Iraq. So we were also getting additional training because we knew we were probably going to be somewhere by ourselves, having to do things that were at the edge of our scope of practice or completely outside of it. Morning reports included like expedient chest tube insertions and things that typical internal medicine programs don't have to do. And so I feel like I got a really excellent training, luckily.
Again, really excellent points to bring up, especially like for myself. I went to an unopposed family medicine residency where, similar to your experience, definitely nothing is as intense as yours, but the idea that the family medicine doctor is the only doctor to do XYZ or to see XYZ. I definitely encourage people, if they're early on in their medical school training, or if they're thinking about what am I going to do after, if you like full scope care, definitely look for an unopposed program or talk to residents about the scope of practice that they get. Because I remember at one hospital I was at, it was an opposed hospital where the internal medicine doctors and the family medicine doctors got the bottom of the barrel when it came to pathology, like the basic things that we would see in clinic, rather than things that would actually be challenging, because those went to all the specialists. So that's really great that you had that training and that exposure to autonomy. I want to go there because now you're a direct care physician. And so when you were doing your internal medicine training and then you did fellowship, did you maintain autonomy when you did fellowship? Stay with us. We'll be right back. My DPC Story just hit 100,000 downloads on Apple Podcasts alone, and we could not have done it without our amazing listeners. So to thank you and to celebrate this milestone, we're giving away an incredible DPC Summit prize package for the DPC Summit happening in Minneapolis this summer. The prize includes My DPC Story swag, and on top of that, the prize also includes a ticket to the DPC Summit. Check out my interview with Dr. Jeff Davenport, where you'll hear more details about the summit. To be eligible for this giveaway, all you have to do is first rate and review My DPC Story on your podcast listening platform. Pro tip, if you rate My DPC Story with a 5-star review, it helps the visibility of the podcast and it helps others to find all these DPC stories. Number 2, take a screenshot of your review and email it to support@mydpcstory.com. You'll find that email in the show notes as well. And third, make sure you're following My DPC Story on all your social media platforms: Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Twitter. All the social links are at the bottom of mydpcstory.com and also in our show notes. For bonus points, share both this episode and the My DPC Story posts about the DPC Summit with your community. The winner will be announced in a future episode, so make sure you tune in to find out if you'll be heading to the summit. If you've already purchased your ticket and you're the winner, My DPC Story will send you a check for the price of your ticket. Thank you for listening to My DPC Story, and best of luck.
So I finished my internal medicine residency, and then I continued on active duty for 4 more years. I deployed twice during that time. So I was in a situation where, again, I was autonomous. I mean, I was in chain of command, but I was often the only physician. And so that really shaped how I practice both ways. I think luckily I was prepared to practice that way because that was my background. I had been fortunate that I had all that clinical experience in medical school, and we were given a lot of autonomy as students. And then again in internship and residency, and then in my professional career as an internal medicine doctor. So I spent 2.5 years of those 4 essentially overseas. That's a lot of autonomy, and medically there was no one else to tell me whether I was doing it right or whatnot. And then when I was stateside, I was staff at a teaching hospital in the Army. So I was very comfortable with that. I got out and I went back to the University of Missouri to do my fellowship. And I had a fair amount of autonomy. It's a small fellowship program. The director knew me since I was a student. In fact, she was one of the first inpatient rotations I ever did. That's when I fell in love with oncology all those years ago, and was coming back to it. And I think she'd always thought pretty highly of me. I think she respected me. It was weird because I was certainly learning hemonc, but I'd already been attending internal medicine.
And Lara, you mentioned that you fell in love with hematology. And so, that when those little bits of our history leak out and we fall in love with things so hard, like for me, it's family medicine, and for you, hematology. When you said that, what did you find in your training that made you fall in love with hematology?
I mean, I really like internal medicine, to be honest. I probably could have gone into any of the subspecialties in internal medicine and perfectly happy, typical to the stereotype. I just nerd out on that stuff. It's so fascinating, the physiology, the pathology. But hematology, oncology, and really the oncology part of it, what spoke to me was the interpersonal skills necessary to do that. Not all hematologists, oncologists have those interpersonal skills, but that was a strength of mine and something that was, part of how I was raised, talking about difficult subjects and whatnot. And so it spoke to me, and that really fulfilled my sense of purpose to be able to offer that to people at such a difficult time in their lives, that I could be the one to deliver that news in hopefully a way that was appropriate. And when you're a student and then subsequently a fellow, a resident fellow, there's a hierarchy in medicine. And so oftentimes I would be in the room with people who didn't feel comfortable with those things. And I'd watch them stumble through these conversations, and it was just terrible. It was so frustrating because I was just watching this whole thing fall apart, and I wanted to just shove them out of the way and say, here, listen, let me tell you how this goes. But I couldn't, right? Because I was junior on the team. And so anyways, I just fell in love with it. And it sounds more bunned, but it's not. It's just fascinating to me as like a foe, like we're all going to die and it's inescapable, but it's just, I don't know. There's just something about that really connects with me and really gets me going as far as interest and reading. I don't know if I'd gone into anything else if I'd be like self-motivated to read on it the way I am on hematology and oncology. And hospice palliative care, it all goes together. That didn't really exist when I was in training. If it had, I very well might have ended up in that rather than hemonc. But I have both the best of both worlds because I have a hospice palliative care approach, and I also get to practice hemonc. So it's what I was meant to do.
So lovely. And when you were done with your last year in fellowship, when you were deciding, okay, this is clearly my passion, did you open up your direct care doors at that point?
I'd never heard of direct care till about 3 years ago, to be honest. I was actually pregnant with my first child, like very pregnant when I graduated fellowship in, June or July. He was born in August. I'd already taken an offer from a very large corporate healthcare system that's, I won't mention their name, but lots of people work for them across this country. They offered me a really nice salary for a 2-day a week part-time in my husband's hometown, which is where we live now. It's a small town of about 9,000 people. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be like the only doctor, small town, community, close medical staff. I could walk down the hall and talk to the radiologist or the surgeon. I could run into my patients in the grocery store, produce section, or at soccer games or whatever. And so I took that job, and I was pretty happy with it. I had a really nice mix of the support from the community, but I was just far enough away from the actual corporation that I had a lot of autonomy. I was under the radar, and I liked it that way. And I really had a chance. I ended up working there for 4.5 years. For the first 3.5-ish years, we really built, we built the clinic. Like, we were seeing patients in empty inpatient rooms when I started. And by the time I left, we had a full treatment center, infusion. I'd gotten it staffed up with the appropriate social work and chemotherapy pharmacists and things that I thought were critical to delivering really good care. I really felt passionate, and I still do. So it's interesting that it's led me to this place of DPC. I really felt passionate that people deserve to have the best of care without having to drive to Kansas City, and that they deserve someone who was honest and had enough integrity that if I couldn't offer that, I could tell them where they needed to go. But if they were going to get the same thing there that we would be giving them in their hometown, that I could offer them the ability to stay near their friends, their family, the community that they knew. And I think we were achieving that. I wasn't unhappy, to be honest. And then a couple things happened. The proverbial EMR change occurred. So the electronic medical record was switched over, and I'd actually had a fair amount of input against what they ended up switching over to. I don't want to speak out of turn, but I think I was I probably had worked the most number of places of the doctors there. I'd done a lot of locums. I'd been all over with the Army. So I was pretty familiar with the different systems that were on the market at that point, and I didn't agree with what they chose. And in my opinion, I'm right, because everything changed after that. That was the first blow. I was there till 9 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock at night, fighting with this system. Weekends, trying to write notes that I had erased. And I really got to my wit's end with that. That really took some joy out. And then somewhere in that time frame as well, there were some administrative changes that took place basically behind my back, frankly. And I just had this seminal moment where I realized that I wasn't doing what I thought I was doing, or I was, but it wasn't ever going to build what I intended to build, because it was my thing and they didn't care about me. That wasn't their thing. And that was a big turning point. That was the turning point. And that's when I found out about direct primary care. I had never heard of it before that.
It's heartbreaking to hear that, though, because, when you talk about your love for hematology oncology and the fact that you could be an interpersonal doctor and be able to talk with your patients about extremely serious and, in a lot of cases, end of life care, that you were in this situation where the surroundings, the EMR, the administration wasn't supporting your future dream, so to speak. So when you say that you learned about direct primary care, how did you come to learn about the movement?
So this was all happening, and I don't think I'd even put my resignation in. I was really just trying to figure out what to do. So the downside to moving to a small rural area is that you've moved to a small rural area. There is no other hospital in town, and it's my husband's hometown. His whole family's here. So to quit that job, that was going to be a huge upheaval. And I was really empty. I was just really miserable, to be honest, because I knew I couldn't do what I was doing, but I didn't know what else I didn't know what other option I could find or what was doable. And then on top of that, as I think most doctors can relate to, I had all of the guilt of how could I leave my patients? These are people that literally trust me with their life. Some of them are in the middle of treatment. Some of them just found out that they had cancer. Some of them just found out they'd come back. And that's a pretty heavy weight to carry. So I was trying to figure out how to get myself out of this situation. And it was actually a friend of mine from medical school. We were in the Army together. And I saw on Facebook, of all things, that she'd opened a practice. And I called her up. We talked to each other once every couple of years, maybe. And I called her up and I said, her name's Andrea. She knows. I said, Andrea, I saw you opened a practice. What the heck? Nobody opens practices. That's unheard of, right? Everybody's sold out at this. And she goes, oh yeah, there's this thing. It's called direct primary care. She's family practice. practice. So that's why she knew about it. You guys are ahead of us as far as that, because you were having lectures at some of your conferences and stuff. And so she had attended one of these, and it was a light bulb moment for her. And she came back to her hometown and did what she needed to do and opened up. And so she's the one that told me about that. And it was on my way home from work. I was crying. I was upset. I called her. She told me this, and it was like, the more I heard about it, I mean, I stopped on the road to hear the rest of it before I lost myself. And the more I heard about it, I was like, no, that's exactly what I want to do. And she had the same medical school background as me. We were classmates, and the same essentially Army background, although she was family practice and I was internal medicine. So as she's telling me these things, I'm like, wait, that's what I was already doing in the Army. We've got our own aid stations. We order the supplies. We keep an inventory. We dispense. I mean, that's right up. That's easy. And she's, yeah, you can totally do this. This is exactly what we're doing. Trust me, you can do this. And that was in the fall of 2018, like around the holidays. And I incorporated in January.
Once you had heard about the model, and when you said you hadn't left your job yet, what was your exit strategy?
So I think I'd already resigned. I didn't really have a plan yet. I just knew I couldn't. I was really just profoundly unhappy at that point. I'm not good at like sugarcoating things. Maybe that's why I'm a good oncologist. And I'm not good at keeping my mouth shut. So once I realized that was an untenable situation, I had to leave. I'm not the kind of person that can just put their head down and do their job. That's not me. So I had resigned already. I think at the time I talked to Andrea, or right there's about. And so then this was like a light at the end of the tunnel for me, honestly. I was in a pretty dark place. I was like, what am I going to do? This is the only thing I've ever wanted to do in my life was be a doctor. I wanted to practice like this. I wanted to be in a small town. I was doing it. My patients are relying on me. My community trusts me. And I find out I can't trust the people around me, essentially. So anyways, so I saw this light, literally. It was like, okay, there's a crack if I can sneak through it. And I threw myself into that. I went and visited a practice, I think within probably a week or two. I got on the internet, the power of Google, because like I said, I'd never even heard of DPC. So it was pure ignorance. And I ordered Doug Fraga, I'm sorry, I don't know how he says his name. His book, that DPC manual. I read it, and gosh, I don't even know, not even a half a day probably. Gave it to my husband to read, gave it to my father-in-law to read, because part of why he retired when he did is because these were the kind of things starting to happen, and he was disillusioned as well. And I just knew I had to figure out a way to do it. I didn't know how I was going to, but I knew I had to. I filed my incorporation papers. There was no other way, honestly. I mean, there just wasn't. I did end up taking a job for another corporate healthcare system in the county just to our north, which is a little bit of a farther commute, but still in our area. I was profoundly unhappy there. I didn't even make it a year before I resigned. But by then I had already started my DPC. I had a small panel. I had my office functional. And I won't say it looked great, but it was functional. I had a lifeline, or I would tell people at the time, and I still feel this way more so with everything that's happened with COVID. I told people I'm building an ark. Like the ship is going down. I have zero doubts about that. I think most of us feel that way. It's sad, but we're watching it fall apart before our eyes, like the Titanic. And I just said, I don't know how I can fix that, but I'm going to get off, and I'm taking my family with me and my patients. And that's all I can do is save that group of people. That's my arc. And then everybody else, unfortunately, is just going to have to figure it out. And a lot of people are going to drown in the process, sadly.
It's an interesting comparison, your practice as an arc, because I think it really goes back to how when people think about when they leave a practice, especially if it's a large practice, to open a DPC, at the end of the day, I can't save everybody, but I really, yeah, absolutely. And we all do, I'm sure. But the idea that I need to recenter and do what's right for me and what's right for the patients who believe in the same vision and the same dream and the same arc. And I think that when people remind themselves of that, the questions of what should my pricing be? I should lower my prices, or maybe I should make this wheel and deal offer for my patients. I challenge people to take a step back and think about the space of you really cannot take care of everybody unless you are taking care of yourself.
I think one of the most tragic things about the whole current healthcare system is that the more conscientious you are, the more integrity you have, the more you're in it for what I would consider the right reasons, the more miserable you are and the faster you burn out. because unless you can ignore all the duplicity going around about you and the corners being cut and the dishonesty from those corporations with the patients, not from you necessarily personally, but everyone around you, from dishonest billing practices to misleading advertising. I mean, all those things. If you're the kind of person that can't stomach that, you leave. I mean, and a lot of people are leaving medicine because they're done with it. They can't find their happiness in it anymore. They feel gross. They feel like they're part of the problem. They're disillusioned. They're suicidal. I think that's the tragedy, because unfortunately what will then happen is more people are in it for the wrong reasons, or who are willing to compromise will stay. And you're going to self-select. And so you're going to have these big cattle production factories of healthcare with people who don't care or undertrained, or maybe they used to care and they're just dead inside now. But that's not who I want taking care of me and my family. And so I felt like I'm getting off the ship. It's that or I'm done. I'm done for myself. And that's not going to help anybody. And I'm not going to risk my family. Like, I'm not going to do this again. That first experience, I'm not doing this again. We're not going to go from job to job trying to find the proverbial utopia that no longer exists. So I just felt like you got to do this yourself or forget about it.
Yeah. Now, when you were mentioning you had your DPC open and you were also working for the company in the northern part of the county, had you opted out of Medicare, or were you still opted in at that point?
No, I'm still opted in now, actually. So when I negotiated that contract with them, I included an addendum of the current employment, which included my locums, because some contracts try to tell you have to ask permission to take those jobs. And I don't look kindly on that. I think it's none of their business, since it's my license and my education. So I had included my locums company that I'd worked with for a decade. I included the hospice agency that I was a medical director, and I included my own corporation, my own LLC that I had already founded with the address of my now shuttered house. And I don't think they paid attention. It was about 6 months into that job that I got another panicky call from the medical director that they'd found my website and the lawyers were going to be calling me. And I was like, I'm pretty sure it's in my contract, actually. And I never heard anything else after that until I resigned. But I did not opt out. And I'm still not opted out, because it's probably a personality thing. I've always been one of these people. I don't ever have one plan. I've got plan A, plan B, plan C, lots of fallback plans. And I really enjoy doing locums. And I wasn't willing to give that up as an option. And frankly, at the time, I had not envisioned yet that this could be for a specialty model. So I was so unhappy that I was willing to give up hematology oncology, essentially, except for possibly doing some locum, and just go back to practice internal medicine, because I thought that was the only way. This is what I'd stumbled upon. This was the light. And if I didn't do that, then I really didn't have any good options.
Wow. Just after hearing what you had been through and what love you found in hematology oncology, it's so sad to hear that. I want to shift to the entrepreneurial side of your journey now. And when you mentioned that your house was shuttered, so can you clarify that? Because your house actually has shutters on it now, because you made your own shutters recently. So can you tell us about your clinic space and about what you are doing now as a specialist in direct care?
Sure. So my clinic space is a journey. So I went back and forth. I'd worked at the town just to our south. That was that first job. I was coming out of the town just to our north. I had patients from that whole catchment area that I wanted to be able to find me and come to me. So I settled on this little tiny town between the two. Essentially, it's 500 people. It has a gas station. That's about it. And there was a house next to the gas station that had been in foreclosure for goodness knows how long. My small children kindly refer to it as the broken house, mom's broken house. I bought it. It was actually, ironically, I think this is another one of those meant to be. It was a VA loan foreclosure. So I negotiated with the VA. I bought it for a fairly small amount of cash, and it was pretty broken. It was pretty terrible looking. Nobody had done anything inside or outside for probably years. You could barely see the house because of the brush growing up around it. The inside was not much better. I think it had been a rental probably for some time before the foreclosure. So it was a pretty rough condition. And what I did was I chose to pay for everything as I went. So I remodeled the inside half of the front half of the house first, because that's what I could afford to do. I didn't touch the outside except for we have a weekend cleanup where we cut down the brush. And I left there's a back 2 bedrooms to the house. I just left that. I still haven't gotten back to that. But it was really cool because a former patient of mine has the floor refinishing business. He and his son refinished the floors. They're beautiful. Another patient of mine has a window glass repair business. He repaired the old wood sash windows, like in the old homes. This home's probably from like the 40s or 50s. He repaired the glass for me that was broken out, put new storm windows on it. Another patient of mine did the painting inside and repainted the walls for me. A daughter of a patient of mine who's the patient since deceased of cancer. His daughter's an illustrator. She painted my mural for me. It's really a labor of love. Everywhere I look, part of it comes from somebody who's been a part of my life as a patient or a loved one of a patient. But the outside still looked pretty darn bad. So because I chose to ignore that, wasn't material to being able to be open and see people. And that's probably my personality anyways. I'm pretty pragmatic. So I just was like, we'll get to it when we get to it. First thing is we got to get this done so we can be open. Just recently, my medical assistant, who's amazing, painted the door for me blue, which like drastically improved the look of the house by itself. And then this past week, I went and bought some fence boards from Lowe's and screwed them together in my garage after work. And then, Wednesday morning, I didn't have any patient schedule. It's just how it worked out. I was open. And so I took my ladder and my pickup truck down to my broken house and my power screwdriver. And I was in my scrubs, my scrub cap. And I hung them up while all of the gentlemen driving to the gas station to fill up their trucks were leering, trying to figure out what the heck I was doing. But I got them up and it looks really cool. And it doesn't really look like a broken house anymore. So I was pretty proud of myself.
That's awesome. And I'll make sure to include a picture of your shutters in your blog post because
I should send you a picture of what it looked like before.
Definitely. I'm sitting here thinking because you can, like you legit just made shutters because you can. So that's amazing. And when you talk about all of these people who helped contribute to your broken house being not so broken anymore and beautifying the inside and making it functional for your clinic space, did you barter with these people or were you able to, did they just offer their services?
It's a little bit of everything, to be honest. I got most of my equipment from a family practice doctor who'd shut his doors after being the only doctor in his town for a number of decades. Everybody was just happy to do it, honestly. I think they felt what I felt. I think they saw the possibilities and they saw my intention. Intention is so important. And I think it was so obvious what my intention was. And because of that, thankfully, so many people were willing to just get behind that because it was the right thing to do. And it still is. It's just cool. It's neat to have that. It's really a community, a family. It's not just a business. It's not just pushing papers or counting RVUs. Non-medical people won't know what those are. But I think if the average public understood that their new cancer diagnosis was worth 2.5 RVUs on a piece of paper somewhere in the manager's office, they'd be pretty disgusted by it.
Yeah. And just to throw just a tidbit out, because if there are patients listening who aren't familiar, RVU stands for relative value unit. And so for all of the care that an insurance compensated doctor is giving or is delivering, every bit of care is assigned.
Distilled down.
Yeah, a certain number, and those numbers equate to number of dollars that typically the corporation gets compensated for the doctor's work. It's so reminiscent. Dr. Haley Miller, who was previously on the podcast, who is probably drooling because of your bartering, but she had mentioned the upsell. Whenever we do a Medicare wellness physical, and then we talk about a skin spot or something, it's upselling. It's more codes, more RVUs, and more billing.
Well, and I don't think patients realize that we're not really directly responsible for the terrible billing that they get. But in some ways we are, because when you're part of the system, you are doing that, right? Because our employment's based on it, frankly, to some degree. And so you're trying to capture all of that. When you code that level 5 visit, you don't necessarily think about the fact that you just cost that person an extra, $200 or whatever, because it's monopoly money. What's an RVU? That's not an actual dollar amount. But I find it pretty disgusting that I could spend like an hour telling someone that they have incurable cancer, talking them through what that means, talking to them about their goals in life, talking about how long they have, calling their daughter to tell them the news because they can't, I often offer to do that for them if they want, because it's such a heavy thing to carry. Staying after work to call people to give them results of a scan that shows their cancer's back. And to think that hour spent with that family holding their hand is worth a 2.5 RVU or whatever it was. Like, I can't get right with that. It just feels dirty.
Yeah. And this is why when I heard about direct primary care myself, and I don't know if it was similar for you, it was like, wait a minute. So you literally just can give care to people, like what we went to medical school for. There's no,
I wanted to be when I grew up. Yeah. I didn't want to get reports on my RVUs. And I don't think people realize that. Like, I'd go into the office, both employment places, I go into the office, they've got charts with your names posted with the doctors showing who's producing more. And it becomes like a video game. And I think I've seen it happen to multiple colleagues where I did think they were doing a good job initially. And then several years in, they've bought into the video game. And they're so busy racking up the Mario coin, and they're proud of it. They're like, I've been the top producer for the last 6 months. And I'm thinking, who the hell cares?
That said, how does not opting out of Medicare play a role at Leeton Medical?
Because I'd been in this community for, by then, 5+ years, I chose to stay opted in for my locums. But because of the connection I had with patients who had followed me already to multiple practices, I chose to accept Medicare. Because if I excluded it altogether from my practice, that meant excluding some people that I'd been a pretty big part of, my life and their lives for years at this point. And I didn't feel right doing that. So I do bill Medicare. That's the only payer I bill. And it's really just out of practicality. I can see how it would be easier to be opted out, and I would love to do that, but it's just not feasible with the way things are set up right now.
And especially, I just can imagine, like, you're a hematologist oncologist, and that is adult medicine with people with
internal medicine. We take care of elderly. Yeah.
I would see it really challenging. And I appreciate you sharing that, just because as the direct specialty care movement is growing, if there's a person who's internal medicine or hematology oncology listening and they're like, well, how would I do that? I love when people share these details about like how it's actually possible. And so when you have patients who are billed under Medicare, does everybody who's a Medicare beneficiary use their...
How do I work that on a ground level?
Yeah.
So all of their visits are billed to Medicare, right? So the actual medical visits, medical services are billed to Medicare, including home visits. I do home visits. So if I have a debilitated or elderly patient, which I have quite a few, I'll go to their home and I bill Medicare for that home visit. And I just have a biller that I have do it because it's easier. Although it's on my short list to learn how to do it myself, because I hear it's really easy and I like doing things myself. But that's how I do the medical visits. And then for any like ancillary things, I leave it up to them. So most of the time we use their Medicare, and that's nice. I can send them to the local county hospital just up the road. We don't have to worry about the inflated, ridiculous prices because they're Medicare patients. They don't need a prior auth. They're able to get the services they need. And that works really well for them. It makes my life a little more convenient. If they need little things like, if they come in for a vital signs check, or they send me their blood pressure numbers for the last 2 weeks, if they email them to me or text them to me or whatever, I don't bother capturing those charges. Frankly, it's just not worth it to me to nickel and dime. It's more work on my part, and it just doesn't feel right. I just feel like that's continuity of care. Same with, especially with COVID, lots of people have been hesitant to go into the bigger centers for things like lab draws and stuff that they wouldn't have thought twice about. Before COVID, the way I had said it was, if you want to use your Medicare, I'll send the orders to the hospital, because this wasn't worth me dealing with it. But if you want to not use your Medicare and pay the $2 for the CDC because it's just easier, then that's fine. But I didn't want to be in the middle of that. I've been a little more lenient with COVID because understandably, I don't want my patients sitting in those waiting rooms either. It's unnecessary. So I've allowed them to bill Medicare occasionally, and I just submit it through the lab or whatnot. It's worked out pretty good. The way that I see that it would be wonderful to be able to opt out of Medicare is it'd be even better than it already is. So I think it's working pretty well. I'm happy with it. I think the patients are happy with it. But if I could opt out of Medicare, I think it'd actually be cheaper for them in the long run than the co-pays and things that they're paying right now. It would certainly be cheaper for the system because I can do all their care for pennies on the dollar, what they're getting. And my life would be simpler because I wouldn't even have to walk this line. I could just say $100 a month and includes everything. Yeah, I could just be done with it. And that's really tempting. But I still love doing locums. I still do locums multiple times a year, and I like it. So I don't know.
And can you share for the listeners, what is your pricing breakdown like?
Sure. I just redid it actually. So I have the same DPC monthly membership price I had when I opened. I set it at $50. For context, I'm in the middle of rural Missouri. The cost of living is pretty low. And I had a target audience. I particularly enjoy caring for the ornery old cattle farmers and blue collar, hardworking people. That's who I enjoy serving the most. And I didn't want to discourage them from coming to my practice. And money's tight for a lot of people. And that's even before COVID. That's a fairly decent commitment for someone who's on a tight household budget. So I really picked that price because I thought it didn't sound like too much. I thought it would be a price that people could digest. I should have used Josh Unber's algorithm. That I'd probably be doing a lot better. But I think if I had, my price would be higher. I bet it would have come out somewhere between 75 and 100. And I think that would have changed my demographic, and I'm pretty happy with the patient panel I have right now. So that price is still the same. I do charge a enrollment fee. I call it a window knocker fee, and I explain it to the patients that way. Look, I hate to have to do this, but if I don't, you're going to get everybody in here just to see what it's all about. And I put a lot of effort into those first couple of appointments, as I'm sure we all do. Hours and hours of sorting through terribly disorganized electronic medical record charts, trying to figure out if people even have the diagnosis that they supposedly have or whatnot. So that 150 is to cover that time put in. And that's still a pretty conservative amount. I don't feel bad about that. And then I just restructured it. So I had patients that followed me. I had cancer patients who followed me to what is now my third practice, hopefully my last. And I didn't want to deal with the duplicate pricing. So initially I just priced it the same, which for specialists out there, they probably think I'm insane, but they were paying $50 a month for comprehensive oncology care. And I was fine with that. I love these people, so I don't mind. But as I've pivoted and continue to pivot, where I've done enough of the direct primary care now that I feel I can see the possibilities for direct specialty care. I couldn't initially, as we talked about. I've just restructured the pricing, and now I'm charging $150 to book the consult, which is also functioning as a no-show fee because that happens fairly often, and then $150 at the time of the appointment. So it's basically a total of $300 for a new consult. I thought that was a fair price to me because frankly, $150 for a full hematology oncology consult isn't really reasonable. But the reason I broke it up like that is because out of respect for people who are working paycheck to paycheck with a household budget, coming up with $300 on the spot, that's a pretty big amount. But if they pay $150 and then they can choose when to book their appointment. So if they know that they got to wait till the next paycheck or pay cycle for that next $150, it's respectful of that. They can do that. They can call, get the consult, put the $150 down for the consult. And then they know full well that the appointment's going to cost $150, so they can plan around that. I thought that made it fair to both of us. And then I'm right now doing $100 a month. And the way I don't know, I think I'll stay with this. It seems to be working, but the way I've had it set up is that first $300. And then at the end of that appointment, when I have a handle on what kind of care they're going to need long-term or otherwise, we agree whether they're going to need a membership to be seen multiple times in the year, or if it's a one-of, then we're good at that 300. Because sometimes it is their primary care doctor will send for something that I'm not worried about, and I say, hey, you don't need to be seen for this again. Or if it's something where it's very clear that it really only needs to be seen once or twice a year, it doesn't really require like close, then I am going to just treat them more like fee for service. I'm just going to charge them $150 at their subsequent appointment. But I didn't think it would be fair for that once a year platelet count to cost them $100 a month. That just doesn't make sense. So that's how I figured it out so far. And I'm happy with that at this point.
And since you opened Leighton Medical, is this the first time you've restructured your pricing?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And when you were at that point of developing this new price scale, what was it that made you say, okay, this is actually something that I need to reassess, and this is something that I need to actively change?
So as people are starting to realize that they can come see me for hematology oncology. So initially, patients that I've had have followed me to this third practice, which is amazing. I really appreciate that loyalty. But as I'm fielding more new consults now, people are starting to ask to see me instead. Their primary care doctor is putting in just a run-of-the-mill system consult, and they're saying, hey, could I go see Dr. Kinney? My sister saw her and she's great, or whatever the case might be. And as I'm getting consults just from some primary care doctors who realize that maybe I'm a better fit for that patient than the other options in town, I just needed something that made more sense. It just doesn't make sense for $50 a month to take care of someone who's on chemotherapy and I'm seeing them once a week. That's not fair to anybody. It's not fair to my regular patients, my DPC patients who are paying $50 a month. So I tried to split the difference, much like I did with the $50. And I tried to follow Josh's algorithm. But in fairness, that if I followed that, I'd be charging like somewhere around $200 a month. And I just don't think that's fair. I want to qualify that because this comes up with the doctors a lot, and maybe more so in the specialty, as you might imagine. There's a lot of this, but I'm worth it. But I'm hematology oncology. They should be paying me $500 a consult. And yeah, I get it. Shoot, I have 4 board certifications. That's a lot of money. But that's not life though. That's just not how it works. I could sit there and say, do you know what I've done? I have all this experience. You should be paying me $400 a month. You can't find anybody like me in 200 miles. Nobody cares. The cattle farmer doesn't care about that, and nobody's going to pay me $400 a month. Even though that makes a lot more business sense, I think $100 makes more sense just for the community and everything. And I don't know, my husband will disagree with this, but my way of thinking about this is the whole point of this is that I should be able to feed my family and afford a reasonably secure lifestyle. I worked for it. But I don't need to be rich. I don't need to be making $1 million a year. Nobody really does. That's really not a reasonable expectation. And if you're going to chase that, then yeah, you're probably going to be in the system racking up RVUs because that's what that's about. And that's not what I'm about.
So when you talk about this idea of living a comfortable life, but you don't have to make $1 million a year, I want to bring up, and this is the list that you had sent me. So this is how I know it's accurate. You have 3 kids, all boys. So that's a whole handbasket of
somebody should pay me for that.
You have a husband, you have 4 horses, 10 chickens, 2 turkeys, 3 barn cats, 3 indoor cats, and a dog. So with that said, you previously mentioned your shutters and not that you are shuttered. How is
$30 total?
Amazing. How is life for you being an entrepreneur and being a mompreneur and being a person who chooses how to run their practice?
I don't want to mislead people, but I don't want to sugarcoat it, but I'm the happiest I've ever been as far as that balance. It's not easy. None of it is, but it wasn't going to be easy. And I was still going to be miserable if I hadn't done this. I work 3 days a week from 9 to 3, essentially. I frequently block out half days or a day for a horse riding clinic or a show or something with the kids, or my husband can't watch the kids that day or whatever. I'm able to do that. I think it's fabulous. And it really fulfills a lot more things for me. So not only am I back to doing what I feel I was meant to do and I've always wanted to do as far as the way I practice medicine, and I really feel like I take care of people. I don't feel any doubts in who I'm serving or whether I'm doing it with integrity. And that's really important to me. So that's amazing. And that's a good enough feeling by itself. But I'm also able to balance it with my life. And my patients don't even care. They appreciate it. They're like, yeah, go home, go take care of your kid. Like, no problem. Because we're invested in each other's life. It's a relationship. So that's amazing. And then I guess I didn't realize what a big part of me it was, or as big a part. But I've always figured out how to do things. That's a big part of being a doctor. A lot, without getting into too much of the Army service, because some of it I can't really share. A lot of what I did in the times that I was in the Army and some of my toughest situations was like logistics, planning and organization and coming up with ways to do things that didn't seem possible to do and figuring out how to make it happen because that's what you had to do. And that part's amazing. It's so fulfilling to be able to do those things, to make decisions and change things. And I don't know, that it's like a whole other hobby to be able to run the business.
Yeah, that's so cool. Dr. Jenna Silikoski was on the podcast previously, and she had mentioned logistics was a huge part of her training also. And for her, she was mentioning how the pandemic, when it hit, she was prepared already with...
Oh, girl, let me tell you, I had full mop gear. I was ready. If it had been the zombie apocalypse, I had everything I needed at my home and in the clinic to serve like the entire town. I could have triaged everybody. I was ready.
When a person looks at their inventory, especially in preparation for flu season, what would you say? You have to get this if you don't have it already.
There's different levels of paranoia here, right? So in February of last year, was it February of last year? It's all a blur. January, February of last year, where we were starting to hear ripples of this, if you were paying attention to what was going on that's when I started preparing for that, because I was concerned we were going to have an outbreak like we ended up having, but I was also very concerned the supply chain was going to be affected. And it was, but it didn't falter quite as bad as it could have. So what I did, like in February, I ordered 3 months of medications on all of my patients, moved my medications to a different location in case things got bad or unrest and somebody broke into the clinic or something. I stocked up on stuff that I wouldn't normally keep in inventory for, like, not major emergencies, but minor, moderate things that I could take care of. IV fluids, SAM splints, so people didn't have to go to the hospital. Yeah, I could splint a fracture, things like that. Antiemetics, simple things that just good to have on hand. I ordered some medications that I knew if the supply faltered, people would have to have. I ordered some basic antiepileptics and stocked up, backstock some insulin, things like that, that if it did come to it, people were going to need them. They can't go without those medications. And then I stocked up on PPE. I was never without PPE. And that by itself was one of the first aha moments that I was on the right track, because I was still at my employed position, transitioning out of that. And I used to refer to the 20-year-old managers of the clinic. There were 10 of them. They're all RNs of some sort. I used to refer to them all as Brittany because I didn't bother to learn their names. And Brittany was telling me what I could and couldn't do and how many pairs of gloves I could have and all this stuff. And I was pretty much over that. But guess what? In my clinic, I could do what I was trained to do. I had received that training in the military. I knew how to operate in a full nuclear environment. So I sourced all that stuff off the internet. A lot of it wasn't traditional medical equipment, but I could put it together. I had all of that available. And when I was doing COVID testing, I'm sure I looked like a fool. So you couldn't get gowns or anything anymore. I'm sure everybody remembers that. So what I could get was Kim gear, for industrial workers. So I had Kim gloves that came up to my shoulders, which was awesome because you could just dip them in bleach. You don't have to throw them away. They're not the latex gloves you couldn't get right then. I had galoshes, the white industrial worker galoshes that came up to my knees. And I had essentially a modified mop suit, a rubber hood. And then it went down to below my galoshes. And then I had face cover. So I was quite the sight, I'm sure, as I was doing COVID testing, but I had what I needed for flu season. I have no idea what this winter is going to look like. I still have quite a lot of backup medication on hand, and I still have all of my isolation equipment. And now that PP has been available, a month ago, 2 months ago, I had my MA. I said, get out every mask we have in the clinic. I want to know exactly how many we have. I want a minimum of 52 per each of us. That's one a week if it really comes down to it for a year. Same with gloves, although we still have our Kim gloves. So if it came to it, we don't really even need the latex gloves. And same with our medicines. For my patients who are on critical chronic medications, I'm pretty much keeping 3 months at all times because it didn't falter as terrible as I think it could have. It still might, but you couldn't get stupid things for a while, like ARB. You couldn't get an ARB for this amount of time. And couldn't get azithromycin for a while when it was supposedly the cure. And Plaquenil, I have patients who actually need their Plaquenil. So anyway, so I've kept that 3 month kind of rule until we know what the heck's going to happen with all this.
Yeah. And I hope that your words make a difference in someone's preparation if they're concerned about their community going into the fall. Thanks for sharing your mindset with regards to how you stock your clinic. Now, when it comes to specialists, so you and Dr. Deanna Granita, who's a rheumatologist in Palo Alto, California, have created the Direct Specialty Care Alliance. So can you tell us about what the DSCA is and what is it going to look like in the future?
So Deanna and I started talking after virtually meeting because we are both involved in the DPC community, and we hooked up. We called each other about a year ago on the phone and shared with each other what we envisioned for those of us who practice the specialty to be able to enjoy some of the same autonomy that the direct primary care doctors have found and be able to make that same kind of difference. Because as you appreciate, for us to have truly a successful medical care system, it's an ecosystem. You can't have all of one thing, right? We need a little bit of everything to be able to practice. Anyways, that conversation, gosh, I think it ended up being like over an hour long, and we were both like super excited and saying the same things, and really felt like we found someone else who had that same passion, that same vision, that same drive, that desire to find a way to make a difference. And that's what started it. And I can't even remember on that first phone call if we even conceptualized an actual organization, but we just had this passion, this drive, this desire to take what the DPC community has been able to do and extrapolate it to the specialty community. Because although there's always been that sort of love-hate relationship between primary care, particularly family practice, and internal medicine, which is the majority of the subspecialists. At the end of the day, we're all miserable, right? Like everybody wants off that ship, and they want off now. It's like rats jumping from a ship. Everybody wants. My buddies who are ER want out. My buddies who are surgeons want out. Everybody wants off. I don't know anybody who's happy, frankly. So that's what started. It was just that idea, that seed. And then we have obviously had multiple conversations. I've never even met her in person, for the record. We've never met in person. We have had multiple Zoom conversations and phone calls, and we ended up conceptualizing a organization of sorts that would allow us to bring the same type of awareness and assistance to specialists looking to go into direct care that the DPC Alliance has been able to do. Run by doctors, for doctors only, physicians only, looking out for each other, sharing knowledge for the sake of helping one another off the sinking ship, and not for the sake of capitalizing, right? Because just as in the DPC world, there's just a million different people that are like, oh, take my course. I'll show you how to do it. And that's fine. That's their entrepreneurs in and of their own, but that's not what we're about. And that's not what we're about. We don't want to be Rubicon. We don't want to be another telemed platform. Like, we're not trying to form like a multi-million-dollar organization where we capture all these specialists. We really just want to find a way to create somewhat of a pathway for people looking to get out. And so that's where it came from. And then we're both busy. She's a mom too. I'm a mom. We both have our own practices. We're picking up kids from school. And so it's just taken us a year of these snippets of conversation. And she's done so much legwork. Her kids are a little bit older than mine. She's done so much legwork to get like the articles of incorporation done. We've got bank account, all of the essentials, and the website. And so once we had a reasonable amount of things in place, we felt like it was safe to go public at that point. And it's a work in progress. I don't know exactly what it's going to look like when it's all done. I know what we want it to look like, but I don't, know exactly how that's going to evolve. It's a little bit scary because it's like having the only well in the desert. People, I think within a week of even saying it on Facebook, we had, 500 people or something want to join. People are starving. And so it's a little bit intimidating to be like the one place that's offering something, but it's got to be done. Someone's got to do it. So,
because you guys are so active on Facebook, can you talk about like where people should go to connect online through Facebook, as well as where is your website for the Direct Specialty Care Alliance?
Sure. A big part of my heart is still with DPC. I'm a DPC Alliance member. I feel very strongly about that. I've been to 2 of the Mastermind. I'm in the DPC Doc Facebook page, and I'm sure they don't want to be overrun with specialists. But I feel like that's where I learned what this is all about. I mean, I don't intend to give that up. And for the Direct Specialty Care Alliance, we have a Facebook group. We're trying. It's definitely physician only. No ifs, ands, or buts about that. There are some DPC doctors who were foundational in us figuring this out that are on there, but we are trying to limit that particular Facebook page to specialists because we want that to be more like a working group of how to do this. And then that one's specialists for direct care. And then we now have a DSC, a Direct Specialty Care Alliance Facebook page that's more of a public page. So anybody's welcome to go on that. And one of the first things we're working on is to create a mapper, a directory, so that as a specialist, or more importantly, as a primary care doctor, particularly if you're independent or direct primary care, that you'll be able to go on there and say, I need a hematologist. And you can, search for that, and you can see what states I'm licensed in or whoever else, and be able to create that network, that web, we keep referring to it, that can create that actual working medical care system that we need to take care of our patients. And vice versa, because sometimes people present to specialists and I need a primary care doctor I can trust. So just the same way the DPC community works so well, hey, I've got a friend in North Carolina whose practice is there. That's really the most seminal thing probably we're working on right now, is to create that for the specialists. That way patients can find this, but also the primary care doctors will be able to find someone they can trust. That's a work in progress, but that's one of our biggest pushes. The actual website. So the actual website for the Direct Specialty Care Alliance is dsballiance.org. And that's an open site. And again, it's a work in progress. The biggest thing that we're working towards is putting together the information for directory so that it can serve that purpose. I actually designed the logo, so you guys can let me know what you think about it. The Facebook group for the specialists to join, the hidden Facebook group, is Specialists for Direct Care. And anyone who's already a member can invite. And we're trying to limit that to, it's physician only, no questions asked, but we're also trying to limit it to active practicing specialists.
So earlier you had mentioned when you were learning about the direct primary care movement from Andrea, and from somebody who had gone to medical school with you, had been in the Army with you, who had very similar training as you, was talking with you on that level of, hey, all of this experience that we had as veterans, as medical students, this allows you to easily run your own practice. Some people, most people, are not necessarily in that boat where they have all of that extra training and that clear understanding of autonomy, and that they have the confidence to do something like as risky as running their own business. So I want to ask, when you talk with people, whether it be through your guys' Facebook group or through the Direct Specialty Care Alliance, when you talk to specialists who are thinking about direct specialty care and they don't have that same experience that you and Andrea had, how do you approach direct primary care? How do you share with them that this is a model that could work for specialists as well?
So I'm a pretty upfront person, and I don't want to mislead anybody. So I'm definitely not selling them the roses picture. What I've been saying to many of their questions is, look, this is not yet defined. We literally created this term within the last year. This is not, there's not a book. There's not a manual. You can't go buy a course on this and set up your practice tomorrow. That's the honest answer. Now, we want to create something along those lines. DPC University is an example of what the DPC community has done to try to address that. There's books that the DPC community can look to. Doug's book was one of the first ones. Paul Thomas has written an excellent book. Julie Gunther's written an excellent book. There's a lot of resources now that you can go to. We're hoping to develop that for the direct specialty care, which is why we felt we needed to also have our own alliance to address that. But the honest answer right now is, if you're not the type of person that is naturally an innovator, I wouldn't say a risk taker, because I am not a risk taker, but I'm a calculated risk taker. And so if I can plan and have an A, plan B, plan C, then I will do something. So it's not like I just ran out on a limb. This was a calculated risk I took. So if someone's willing to educate themselves, visit practices, visit primary care, direct care practices, they're more established. They have a lot to teach us as specialists. If people are willing to put in that time, get to know the DPC world, how that works, network with people that are already doing some version of direct care, because there is actually a fair amount. They're coming out of the woodwork, but because they've been one-ups. Some of them are fee for service, more of a fee for service model, but it is a thing. And this is allowing us to find each other, which is really powerful. But at the end of the day, this is not a set path. It's not like you can graduate residency and sign a contract and be DSC. You just can't, unfortunately. That's just not how it is. So for those people who are going to be opening practices, probably for the next couple of years, you're going to have to be an entrepreneur. You're going to have to be an innovator. You're going to have to be able to think through some of these things if you don't want to fall flat on your face. You're going to have to take some calculated risks. You're going to have to cut back on your lifestyle. I know that's talked about a lot for DPC. but unfortunately, it's even more so for DSC. Not to be uncouth, working part-time, I was making 4 times what I'm making right now because I was a desired specialist in the rural area. And I still get recruiting emails like every day for over $500,000 just to work like 4 days a week. That's disgusting, frankly. I mean, it's awesome, but it's disgusting. But I'm probably never going to see those kind of figures, even if my DPC DSC is wildly successful. And I'm okay with that. But they're going to have to be okay with that. If they're making $1 million doing pain management right now and they're not okay with making 200,000, it's probably not going to be for them. And that's okay. Everybody has their own thing. Some people will join practices that do get up and running, just like we've seen in DPC. Some people will probably choose to do some sort of hybrid or fee for service, or maybe work for like a multi-specialty group, or, there's lots of different options. And I think the beauty of this is, Deanna and I've talked about, we're not ever going to be for everybody. Just as DPC, that doesn't work for everybody, frankly. And that's okay, because all we need to do is talk about what we're about. And for people that want that, then they'll come to us. And for people that don't, that's fine. Maybe we're just a stop in their journey. Or maybe, again, as we see in DPC, maybe they reach out because they're miserable, but they're not quite miserable enough yet. Maybe in 2 years, they come back to it, because at that point, the trade-off makes sense. So the important thing, the reason we did this, though, is to have that there, because there isn't anything, or there wasn't anything. So to throw that out into the universe is the important first step, because people have to at least be able to Google direct specialty care. I mean, it has to exist somewhere in real life, and if anybody's going to have a chance to put their teeth into it.
And have you guys, just like how direct primary care is a legal term, how about direct specialty care? Are you guys addressing that as a legal term?
So it's not. So here's the problem with that. So if we extrapolate from the direct primary care precedents, I guess, if you will, then it's probably going to be a bit too restrictive to encompass all the different specialties. For instance, the surgical specialties, there's very few instances in a surgical specialty where a true membership is going to make sense. So to restrict them to that is not going to be reasonable. And that is part of the direct primary care definition, a very big part of it. On the flip side, as somebody who's passionate about direct primary care and very thankful for having found it, I think that those specialties that can have membership really need to entertain that, because that is one of the elegant, beautiful things about direct primary care, is that affords so much freedom and ability to not live paycheck to paycheck. And, it facilitates the whole process significantly, in regards to overhead and not complicating your life if you're trying to do bookkeeping and all of those things. That I think if the medical specialties, so the ones that branch off of internal medicine, most of them, a membership model of some sort makes sense, with taking care of chronic, full spectrum, long-standing patients. If they don't understand the value of a membership model, I think there's a likelihood there'll be a lot more failure and disappointment. Because if you just try to run this like a private practice, they're going to run into all the same barriers that have made private practices an endangered species. Yeah. And there's already that out there. We don't need to teach people how to do private practice. They can figure that out. That's not the point. So to get back to your question, I don't know exactly what it's going to look like, because I think it's a little bit complicated, and I'm not sure exactly how we're going to sort that out. We might have to have separate umbrellas for specialties, surgical or procedural based specialties versus the internal medicine certifications like rheumatology, oncology, cardiology, pulmonology. I think it's going to look a little bit, there's going to be a couple different versions, and that might be challenging from a legal standpoint, but gotta start somewhere.
Sure. Now I want to go into talking about the masterminds, because you said that you've already attended 2 DPC Alliance masterminds, and you were just at the last mastermind that Jack Forbush and company hosted in Bangor, Maine. So what was your experience like at these masterminds? Because there's quite a few coming up.
So last year, myself and my RN, who's an amazing individual who's now followed me to 3 practices, attended the one based out of the Kansas City area. So that included a lot of pretty well-established practices. Ryan Neufeld, I'm blanking on everybody's names, Van Lassie. I mean, some famous people in the DPC movement. It was fabulous. That was an amazing weekend. It just feels really good to have people who are all about the same thing in a room together. It's a really empowering feeling. So very energizing, but obviously very informative. We visited, I think Jen Rader's practice. It was Jen, Kylie Vanneman in Kansas City, Brian Neufel, Vance Lassie, and I feel like I'm missing someone, so I'm sorry, whoever I'm discounting. But anyways, those practices have all been established for quite some time. They're very successful. They have multiple employees. Most of them have multiple physicians or medical care people. So, I'm nosy, right? I just went through everybody's offices. I asked a ton of questions. We had great social times and great learning. We exchanged some teaching on procedure, just all sorts of things. How the office is laid out. That's something that I'm sure is going to evolve right now. The way my office is laid out, I'll bet you in 5 years, it's not laid out that way, even if I'm staying in the same building, because the workflow changes. When you add people, it was me by myself, and then it was me and my RN, and now it's me and my RN and my MA. And each time you add somebody, it changes the workflow. But yeah, it was an incredible experience. And I took my RN with me, and she was just as blown away as I was. I mean, it felt like this sounds super corny, but it felt like we were changing the world. It really did it. It really had that feel to it. So you have all those people who are all passionate, intelligent, educated, powerful people, and we're all trying to push the same direction. It felt really good. I've never felt like that at any medical conference before. Let me tell you, the bar scene from Star Wars that people reference, like when they're feeling awkward in an environment. So that's how I felt when I would walk into an ACP meeting with 2,000 other internal medicine doctors, and I'm sitting there looking around thinking, is there a bunch of weird people? I would not talk to these people if on the street. I don't know who these people are. Didn't feel like that at all. It was like being at home. And then my husband and I actually went to the one in Bangor, Maine. What was that? Just this past weekend. It was just as amazing. Everybody comes to the table with the same goals and desires and mindset. And it's just a really refreshing experience. And Jack and his wife were great hosts, amazing hosts. We had a big old lobster dinner. I think that's the first time I've ever had that. And I'm paying to send my medical assistant and my RN to the one in Herman, Missouri with Dr. Jennifer Broder Allen, who I would have gone to that. No offense, Jack, because it's nearby to where I live, and her practice is structured somewhat similarly to what I've been going towards, but I had a conflict. So I'm sending my office staff to that one. That's how valuable I think it is.
That's great. And I'm glad you brought that up, that it's not just for DPC physicians that staff can also attend these masterminds. So that's wonderful. And if you are interested, there are still quite a few DPC Alliance masterminds all over the country. And so if you go to dpcalliance.org, you can see the offerings. You can see the masterminds that are coming in the future. And then also for people who are not DPC Alliance members, just remember that the code My DPC Story, all caps, one word, can get you $50 off of registration. So keep that in mind. But definitely, I encourage people to check out the masterminds, because there's still quite a few all over the country.
Yeah, I think there's all the ones I've been to, there's been quite a few attendees who are still employed. They're just thinking about doing this, or they have a goal in the next year or two. I think it's priceless. It was $400, something like that. You can't go to a medical conference for that and have that kind of experience. I think it's completely worth it. And if you can't make one because of a scheduling conflict or whatnot, put it on your calendar for next year. And I was looking at the dates like 8 months ago, because I was so excited after the last one. But you can find on the dpcalliance.org, you can find the directory. Find a practice that's within driving distance for you. Call them up. Everybody I've ever talked to has been nothing but welcoming. And go hang out at their practice for a day. The first practice I ever visited was, and I'm blanking on her name, she's going to be so mad. She's in Columbia, Missouri. Anyways, I just cold called her out of the blue and I said, hey, my name's Lara Kinney. And I think I just Googled her practice at the time, because it was right after I'd heard about DPC. And I said, do you mind if I come see what you're doing? Of course, she was like, no problem at all. And I just drove down there one morning and hung out for the day. And I asked her a million questions. She's probably answered 50 million times. But she was nothing but gracious. She showed me the office. She told me, why she was there and what was working and what wasn't. And I visited a ton of practices that way. I just recently, within this past year, I visited Kylie Vanneman's practice again in Kansas, because I added that MA, and like I said, the workflow changes every time, and she's got a bigger office with more staff. And I said, I just need to come sit in your office for half a day and just take notes. I just need to see how you guys are doing things, because I don't know if we're doing them the best way. or I just need those ideas. And sure, everybody's, sure, come on over. We got coffee. And every single person I've talked to in the direct primary care world has been amazing. Bridget Grunder, I have to give her credit for that, at Liberty Family Medicine in Columbia, Missouri. She didn't know it, but she was the first practice I visited.
I second that encouragement to reach out to somebody, especially if you do have somebody local to you, because it really does make a difference. Like for me, my person was Dr. Janine Rodhams in Santa Cruz. She has Santa Cruz DPC. And I had heard about DPC. I talked to her about DPC. I had gone to the HINT Summit. But the thing I remember specifically, and this is why on my DPC practice website, I have the hours listed as by appointment only, is because that's what I remember so vividly seeing with this beautiful logo on Dr. Janine Rodham's door. And I was like, legit, that is saying that she is her own boss. By writing by appointment only, she is able to make her own hours work for her. And that was the icing on the cake for me, in addition to seeing her beautiful clinic and how it's designed and how she needs it to work for her, as well as how it allows her to grow her practice. But yeah, it's such a different experience when you are in a room with other DPC physicians or direct specialty physicians, and you're just talking about the model of DPC or doing direct care. It is so addictive.
I think any of us feel that way, which is why it's such a joy to be part of such a passionate group of people who share the same passion as you do. There's just really nothing else like that.
And for those people who find that resonates well with them and they want to reach out to you after this podcast, what's the best way to do?
You can go to my website that has all my numbers and emails on it. That is leetonmedical.com, LEETON medical.com. The spelling of my name throws people off. So if you don't mind, I'll spell it for people, because I think I'm probably the only person in the world with my exact name. Certainly the only doctor. So my first name is Lara, Lara, and my last name is Vicente-Kinney, which is spelled B as in boy, RIS as in Sam, E as in Ed, N as in Nancy, O, and then a space, and then Kinney, which is spelled Keney. So unfortunately, all three of my names have a little bit of a spelling thing in them. But if you get that spelling, pretty much can't help but find me. And I am more than willing to talk, email, call. You can hit me up on Facebook. My staff knows that if any physician calls me for any reason, they're to give them my personal cell phone, because that's one of my pet peeves. When I'm trying to get a hold of someone and they give me the office front number and I have to go through a phone tree, that usually ends in me saying I'm not talking to that doctor, because we're colleagues. So I feel like doctors should talk to doctors. That shouldn't be a barrier. So by all means, if you find me on Google and you call the practice, you will easily get a hold of me. There's no phone tree. I refuse. I might even just answer the phone. I still do.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Dr. Kinney, for joining us today.
Thank you. I appreciate this opportunity. I hope somebody gets excited like I did when I heard about it.
Next week, look forward to hearing from Dr. Kenneth Q of UDOC, a direct primary care practice in Midlothian, Virginia. And if you're just starting out or looking for help with marketing and lead capture, be sure to check out Marketing Beaver. For as little as $3 a day, they will help your marketing game be on point. They have an exclusive offer for My DPC Story listeners where they will help you get your marketing game started through a pitch video. And Global Ultrasound Institute is offering a 10% off registration discount exclusively to My DPC Story listeners for their next 2-day in-person event coming in October in San Francisco, California. Check out our website, mydpcstory.com, for more information and to check out these discounts. Also, a reminder that there are still some incredible DPC Alliance masterminds coming up. Use the code MyDPCStory, all caps, one word, when you register at dpcalliance.org. If you like what you heard today, please leave a review and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast. Tell your friends too. For more information on this episode and much more, including DPC swag, please visit mydpcstory.com. Also, for the latest in DPC news, check out dpcnews.com. Until next week, this is Marielle Concepcion.